through my testimony. I don't know what he's going to say to you through my testimony. I've just always felt weird telling my testimony to people. I always felt like, why would it make a difference? But God had other plans. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do with this. I'm excited. Well, I want to start out by saying this. God is real. God, is it okay that I stand down here? I just need to be with my people here. I don't like being way up there. I gotta see your beautiful faces. God is real. I didn't always know that God was real, but God showed me that he was real. And it completely changed my life and many people around me simply because God revealed himself to me as real. And if anybody ever asks me, how do I know God is real? I tell them, because I'm here today, because I am who I am now. I know God is real. I don't need any more proof than the fact that I'm standing here breathing today before you in the house of God to know that God is real. Because there is no other reason why I would be here unless he was real. My life was not going in that direction at all. And even those who may struggle with the reality of God, when I tell them what God did in my life, they're like, okay, well, I can definitely see why you believe he's real. And I know he's real beyond anything. So let's get on with it. I was born in 1980 in Detroit, Michigan, in the middle of a snow blizzard, which is sort of funny because I'm always cold. And anybody will tell you it'll be in the middle of the summer and I'm still running a space heater in my office because I'm freezing. But yes, I was born in Detroit. And apparently it's very cold there. I don't know. I don't want to go back because it's cold. I was born in 1980 in Detroit, and I didn't stay there long. When I was 3 years old, my parents moved to Florida. My dad was born and raised in Florida, and he wanted to retire, so he wanted to go back pretty much home. He wanted to go back to his roots. And my mother begrudgingly went with him. She didn't really like Florida. Florida is an interesting place for darkly complected people. It can be. My father grew up in the South before and during the Civil Rights era, and he experienced some crazy things. He told me a story once when he was chased by the Klan once, like that really happened to him. Why did he want to go back to Florida? That's weird. My mother, she was born in Mississippi. She was born and raised in Mississippi. She experienced a lot of similar things. Her story is sort of interesting and complicated. My mother was a biracial woman. If you're wondering why half my kids look completely white, that's why. She was biracial. My grandfather, he was not black, and that made it very, very difficult for her growing up in the South in the 50s and the 60s, and she had a lot of issues about that. But she begrudgingly moved back to the South, and as soon as they got back, their marriage started to fall apart. For a lot of reasons. I can't tell you all the reasons because I was 3 and I don't remember that. But their marriage started falling apart, and things started taking a weird turn for the worse in the Hill household, and a lot of it affected me. By the time I was old enough to go to school, I was miserable, and I wanted to die. I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but I remember always feeling like I wanted to die. I remember mourning waking up at a very, very young age. I remember always having to go to the principal's office because I would say disturbing things to the teacher or draw disturbing pictures. I was that kid. Sorry, teachers, because I know what it's like to have that kid. That's weird, yeah. But I was that kid, and I struggled with being bullied a lot. I was bullied in pretty much everywhere I went. I was bullied at school, but I was also bullied at home. At school, it was an interesting situation. Like I said, this was the early 80s, and though things had gotten better, there was still quite a bit of racism going on. I'm not one of those guys that play the race card. Clearly, that's not an issue for me. I moved to Carlsbad. Sorry, that's just funny. I have this running joke with people. I say there's so few black people in Carlsbad that we call each other by number. And if somebody moves away, we have to change our numbers, and it messes it up. And sorry, I just think that's funny. I think that's funny. Okay, sorry. But aside from racial tension, I was just a really geeky kid. I was bigger this way than that way for much of my childhood, and I oh, thank God for orthodontics. I had the strangest teeth. My teeth, they pointed at people like they just went out in these weird directions, and they just weren't right. I'm so glad for braces. But anyways, I was a very geeky kid, and to be honest, I had a very hard time fitting in general. If I looked like everybody else, I still would have had a very difficult time fitting in. And as kids do when they're younger, they're very clear on making sure that you're aware that you know that. And that happened, and I would get pushed around a lot. I'd get beat up. Every name you can ever think of, I was called. And I had a couple of teachers that were just as bad. I struggled with my academics. Education has come so much further now, and we know when there are certain disabilities and things, and we know that has nothing to do with your intelligence. But it wasn't quite like that back then, and I had a hard time reading for a very long time. And, everybody thought I was really stupid, and, well, frankly, so did I. And that was very hard for me, because I hated going to school. I hated going to school. But what was worse was I hated going home more. So after a hard day at school, I would have to come home. And by this time, things had deteriorated in my parents' lives so much. And please understand something. Let me say this before I begin to speak about my parents. My parents were good people, and they had a lot of bad things happen to them. And sin is an interesting thing, because sometimes things happen in people's lives that they didn't ask for, and they don't know how to respond to it. And I know now as an adult, I didn't understand this for a while, but I know now as an adult, my parents did the best they could. They were good, hard-working people, and they did the best they could. But they had some horrible issues going on in their lives, and the enemy wreaked havoc in their lives, and unfortunately, they didn't know how to express it properly. They didn't know how to handle it properly, and a lot of that came my way. My father started drinking, and my mother, well, to be frank, she went a little crazy. She had some mental health issues, and she would really beat me hard sometimes. And I was a little mischievous. Sometimes I deserved to get beat because I did some stupid things. But to be honest, half the time, if not most of the time, I had no clue why I was being beat. I just knew that she was really angry and bitter all the time. And I knew that I was scared to death of her. And I was scared to come home, and I was scared if I didn't see her smiling, I just assumed I was going to get beat at some point. And I never knew when to expect it. So I just lived every day in fear. I was afraid to go to school. I was afraid to go home. But my mother was under a lot of stress. Her marriage was crumbling. She was a teacher in the school system down there in Charlotte County, and she was experiencing a lot of racism. She was the first black teacher in Charlotte County, And she was having a lot of stress on the job. And she went through a lot of things when she was younger. Her mother died when she was young. Half of her family disowned her. She was abused by several people. In her first marriage, her son, my half-brother, was kidnapped for 3 years, had no clue where she was. So by this point, my mother, she had a lot of things that she was dealing with. And I guess she took it out on me. And if she wasn't beating me physically, she was constantly reminding me how much of a disappointment I was. I was not, I guess she had this image in her mind. My parents were well off. They worked very hard. They put me in good schools. They put me in every athletic program you could think of, and they just couldn't understand why I wasn't a star athlete, straight A student. Because that's what I was supposed to be, because I had all these opportunities, and I did, and I was grateful for those opportunities, but I was a band nerd. So, anyways. There were some very inappropriate things that happened between my mother and I that I'm not going to go into detail about, but there are certain things that shouldn't happen between a mother and a son, and those things happen. My father is a great man. He's an inspiring man. He's got a great story, but he's a very selfish man. And I was never angry at my father for not being around because he was working hard. Both of my parents had multiple jobs. They had different investments, and we had real estate property. And my mother was a full-time teacher. My dad owned a barbershop, and he also was a supervisor at a medical facility. He was an administrator. Both of my parents worked very hard, and my dad was always working hard. He was always at work. Man never slept. I don't know how he did it. And I never had a problem with that because I knew my dad was working hard to provide for us, and I was grateful for it. The problem I had was when he did have time to come home, he'd be out drinking and gambling. And I didn't understand that. My mother would tell me things about him that I didn't realize they weren't true until later. Until she died. I didn't know they were true. So I was actually more terrified of my father than my mother because she would tell me that he was going to do all these horrible things to me because she was mad at him. So on the rare occasion that my dad would be home, I was so scared of him that I didn't want to be around him. I remember one time he came, like many fathers do with their sons. I enjoy doing this with my sons. He came to wrestle with me, and I thought he was trying to kill me. I was scared. I started crying and screaming. Sorry. I didn't know that he was just trying to play with me. Sorry. And to make things worse, there were other people in my family that chose to abuse me in a very ungodly, perverted way. It was very confusing because all of this happened to me before I was just as young as I can remember, to be honest. There's still a lot of things I don't remember. So as a result of that, I was a very sad kid, and I was a very dark kid. I would always talk about death and gruesome things, and I would say disturbing things sometimes because I didn't, it was the only way I knew how to react to what was happening to me. And it just made everything else worse. By the time I got to middle school, things started changing because I started changing. And near the end of my 6th grade year, I hit a growth spurt, and I actually, the height I am now, that's what I was in 6th grade. And out of nowhere, it was weird. I was the only one in 6th grade that could sprout a full mustache. It was a nice mustache, too. It was a nice, thick mustache. I'm still waiting for my voice to change, though. I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know why I have the voice of Mickey Mouse. But all of a sudden, things started changing. People started treating me different. And I started to see myself a little different because I realized people were responding to how I looked. All of a sudden, I had a little confidence. But deep down inside, I was still that scared little boy. I stood up to my mother one day. She looked like I don't know, I could sort of see when things were going to get bad, and I just remember thinking, I'm bigger than her now. I don't have to take this, and I just remember getting in her face and looking at her and saying, I'll kill you if you touch me, and I meant it. I meant it. I was so angry. And as much bitterness as she had, I took it all on. And when I stood up to my mother that one day, she never touched me after that. As a matter of fact, it was weird. She talked to me different from then on. I can't say it got much better, but it was different, at least. And I had more confidence after that moment, and all of a sudden, girls are starting to like me, which that was a very new thing that I liked very much. All of a sudden, kids wanted to hang out with me. I'm invited to different parties, and I looked like I was 20 when I was 12. And unfortunately, for the first time in my life, people were offering me relief from the pain I was feeling. And I took relief however it could come. I got involved with girls way too young, and I did a lot of things that I shouldn't have done. I started drinking at the age of 12. I would sneak out. I think about this today. I would go to these parties with these high school kids, and I'm just like, I'm thinking now, why? These kids must have been losers if they were hanging out with a 12-year-old. But whatever. I just didn't want to hurt anymore, so I did anything I could to distract myself from the hurt. But those things that distracted me were dark things, and they were sinful things. And my life became dominated by sin. I enjoyed sin, and I wasn't ashamed that I enjoyed sin. Because I looked around at all the people that seemed to be getting ahead, all the people that seemed to have power, all the people that had power over me, and they didn't seem to care that they were sinning. I always say I was never raised in church, but I was raised around church. I went to a Christian private school from kindergarten to 8th grade. I had heard the gospel message many times. I'd met several people who called themselves Christians, but all I knew was all the people that hurt me so deeply, they were Christians, and I didn't want to be like them. That's what I knew. I can't say that I necessarily thought, I never thought God didn't exist. I just figured he didn't care that I existed. And I just assumed I was going to hell anyway, so why even try? And that's what I did. I didn't try. I'd go to church if they were having some type of event or doing something fun. Yeah, why not? I would go through the motions. I'd even pray the sinner's prayer and come forward. I probably did that about 50 times. Didn't mean it. I just knew people would be nice to me after I did it. And that's the only reason why. By the time I got to high school, I lost all hope. And I was starting to spin out of control. Between partying a lot and just the craziness going on in my home, and me just convinced that I was going to hell, things got really dark for me. My urge to die grew stronger and stronger. And my anger began to take on a new, it was just different. And it mixed with that desire to die, and all of a sudden I started having homicidal thoughts. I would always write little stories. I would journal, and I'd write stories about killing people because I was that angry. I would just sit there and think about it. I would wonder what it would be like if I would die or if somebody else died. And you really have no, when school shootings happen, you really have no clue. There was a tragedy long before the shooting. Trust me. Because I understand those kids. I know what drives people to that. And if it wasn't for God, you might have heard about me some other way. When I was 15, my then girlfriend informed me that she was pregnant. So things weren't getting much better. Thank God for the sake of the baby. She had a miscarriage, but it hurt me deeply. It hurt me deeply because, I don't know, I just had in my mind, it was sort of late when she lost a baby. We already named him. And I just sort of had in my mind, things can be different. I can have someone who loves me, and I can love him, and I can know what it feels like to have a family. And then I find out later that year that my mother was dying of cancer. And I don't want to come across harsh, but I was happy about it. And I did some things that I regret. When she was dying, I sort of ended up becoming her caretaker, and I was very mean to her, and I didn't help her much. But I was just so angry. I was so bitter. And I was so terrified that once she died that my dad was going to do all these horrible things to me, because that's what I'd pretty much been told my whole life, that she was the only one keeping me safe, and she was beating me. So she died at the age of 16. It was the day I got my driver's license. It was a weird day. It was in the summer. It was in July. And I went out and partied that day. I sort of felt like it was a good thing because I knew I wouldn't have to be so afraid, be so hurt. And but I started getting a little out of control. When I was 14, I started having nightmares that somebody was going to kill me. I'd have this weird reoccurring nightmare. It's weird. Sometimes I still have it. That my father was going to kill me. And that I was going to die when I was 16. So if you could imagine, by the time I hit 16, and this is starting to happen, I started getting a little crazy. I started getting very paranoid. I started carrying a gun around with me all the time because and it wasn't like I was a thug or anything. I couldn't be further from it. I was a band nerd. I was in theater with a gun. Contradiction. Weird. But I was just really paranoid, and I remember I would drive all the time, and I would think people were following me. And I would always go different ways home because I thought people were following me. And things started getting really dark. I was starting to lose touch with reality. And I was ready to shoot my head off one day. Luckily, my girlfriend called me at the time and talked me out of it, and they sent me away for a bit. And I came back, and to be honest with you, I was worse when I came back. Because now I'm feeling all these things, and I'm doped up with all this medication. And things really just got worse. So now, instead of drinking and partying, now I'm drinking and partying and popping pills. And now my mind's not clear, and now I'm doing really strange things. And it was fun for everybody in the beginning. I was the life of the party, but now I'm doing strange things, and I'm scaring people. And one day I was thinking about how I was going to a party. I was going to a party at my girlfriend's house, and I just thought, what if I didn't leave my gun in the car? What would happen? Maybe I should just kill myself in front of all of them. Maybe I should take a couple of them out. I remember thinking that. Thank God I left the gun in the car. I went to the party. I left the party. But then everything changed. Because then God showed up. God showed up and everything changed. Everything changed. Everything changed to its opposite. Everything was completely different from then on. I changed. Things around me changed. God is real. God is real. God is real. I was driving home, and it was weird. I don't understand it to this day. I think it was like conviction. I felt a presence in my car with me, and it felt bad. It was scary, and I pulled over, and I started screaming and crying and freaking out because for some strange reason in that moment I thought I was dying. I can't explain to you why. I just felt like I was dying. And I was so angry because it was like, why was my life so bad? What did I do? I didn't deserve it. I didn't ask for any of these things. Things started when I was so young. I had no choice in anything. Yeah, maybe I started doing some bad things, but I was just trying to deal with it the best I could. And I was so angry, and I just remember screaming at the top of my lungs, just so filled with rage that my life was going to end, and I was so miserable. And instantly that feeling, that presence turned to the most loving thing I've ever felt in my life. And for the first time in my life, I felt loved. First time in my life I felt loved. Please understand something about me. When you see me in worship and all I can do is kneel down and cry, those are tears of joy. I'm done mourning. I've mourned most of my life. I don't have to mourn anymore. In that moment, everything changed. And I knew I wasn't alone. And I knew that God was real. And not only was He real, He was real for me. That He cared about me, that He loved me, that He knew me, that He wanted to be in my life. And everything changed. I didn't even understand what was happening, and I didn't hear any audible voices or anything at that point. If I did, that would have been bad. I didn't hear any audible voices or anything, but somehow God communicated to me that things could be better. I didn't have to give up hope. And maybe I did die that day. That old man died at that moment. And I was raised up in newness of life. And I became a different person, a new creation. I drove home excited. And I didn't even know why I was excited. I didn't even understand what was happening to me. I rushed home and I tore my house apart looking for my Bible. And I remember I just started skimming through the New Testament and just excited. And it was so weird because, like I said, I grew up around Christianity. I knew scriptures. I heard the Bible a lot of times, but all of a sudden it was for me. God was speaking to me. These words were written down for me. And I couldn't get enough. I stayed up that whole night. I didn't sleep. I was just so excited because God was real. And these words were real. And they were for me. And I was just taking it all in. And then I remember I went to church that morning. I didn't shower or anything. I was all filthy. I was out partying the night before. And I went to church. I hadn't slept. I'm sure I looked really strange. I was ridiculously excited. I was probably freaking people out. And it was real. It was real. We sang songs, and I knew I was singing to God. That He was listening, and that He was singing over me. I knew when the pastor was preaching, that it was the Word of God, and God was speaking to me. It was real. It was never real until then. And everything changed. Sorry. I really freaked people out that Monday morning because I showed up to school and I was walking around with my Bible and I was telling everybody about Jesus. Everybody thought I was on drugs. And then a week went by and I'm still doing it. People are starting to get worried. And after a couple of months, people were like, wow, this really happened. I was the last person on earth that anybody would think would be that person. But I never stopped, church. I never stopped. I'm still excited to tell people about Jesus. God did so many wonderful things. That happened in October of my junior year of high school. And to make a long story short, I don't have time to tell you the whole story. A revival took place at my high school. God raised up me and about 3 other kids, and He just did amazing miracles in our lives, and we couldn't stop telling people about Jesus. And there was a revival at my public high school where God was not invited. I have to talk about it a little because it was just so amazing. To this day, my life was so changed from what happened in those 2 years. We started meeting in front of our school, right in the front entrance, right in front of the door. We were being bold. Teens can do that. And it just started out with about 3 of us. We would just pray every morning, and we weren't praying little gentle prayers. We were getting Pentecostal people. And we were just praying over our school. We were praying for each other. We were just praying that God would touch people around us, that He would make a difference in people's lives, like He made a difference in our lives. And to make a long story short, by the end of the year, there was 80 of us meeting in front of that school. People started to take notice. We were freaking some teachers and principals out, and it was awesome. It was amazing. I remember being excited to go to lunch every day to get the report from my friends who got saved that day. Hundreds of kids were touched. Every youth group in Charlotte County in those 2 years grew. We were just a bunch of kids, 16, 17, 18 years old. We found a church that would let us have a youth rally. We raised the money ourselves. We made 7,000 flyers. We passed them out all over town. Only 100 people showed up, but that was fine with us. And we called it HGI. We called it Holy Ghost Invasion. We had this monthly youth rally. We were just kids. Sorry, that's so awesome. We were just kids. Nobody was leading us. If anything, we were freaking out our youth pastors because they were scaring us, or we were scaring them because we were kids. And we did things like kids. And we had ideas like kids. And people were getting saved, and people were being filled with the Spirit at school. An English teacher, Mrs. Eisenberg, a Spirit-filled believer, she let us use her classroom after school on Thursdays, and we would meet together, and we'd have prayer meetings, and we'd be in there for hours, and we would just be praising God, and again, and we were just kids. It just happened spontaneously. Nobody came in and led it or anything. It just happened. And kids were getting saved and filled with the Spirit. at school. And and we got so big that we couldn't fit in the classroom anymore. And that church that let us do the youth rallies, we started meeting. That church didn't even have a youth group. And then it ended up having the largest youth group in town. Because we'd meet every Thursday. And people were getting filled with the Spirit. People were getting saved. And it was so amazing. It was so amazing. A year into that, the Lord called me in the ministry, and I'll be fully honest with you, I thought it was a very bad idea. I remember it being sort of clear that he called me in the ministry. I was praying. I'm not one of those really spiritual people that see visions and hear things. I think that's really cool, but I've just never been that guy. But I was praying, and I started seeing. It was weird. I started seeing what I see right now. I'd see like a mic in front of me, or a Bible, or a podium, and I'd see people in front of me, and this is the only weird spiritual thing that's ever happened to me. Every once in a while, I'll be in a place, and I'll be like, that was in the vision. Wow. Anyways, I knew what that meant, and it just sounded like the dumbest idea I ever heard of. And I remember saying to God, I need a minister. I can't be a minister. Please understand, God changed my life, but I still had some issues. I still have issues. And he called me in the ministry, and I chased after him, and I've done everything in my life from that moment on Highway 65 at 3-something in the morning to serve God with all my heart and all my soul, and to make sure that people know that they don't have to hurt anymore, that God is real. And this is my only message for you today. And it's very simple. God is real. I don't care what's going on in your life. He's real. I don't care how bad things get. I don't care if you got laid off twice. I don't care if your marriage fell apart. I don't care if your kids are acting crazy. I don't care if somebody harms you, if somebody does something terrible to you. If you experience horrible things when you were growing up, none of it matters. We aren't victims. We are victors. I don't mourn what happened to me. I don't hold any anger in my heart towards my parents. By the way, God restored my relationship with my father and I. I don't have to walk around with bitterness and anger. You don't either. You serve the same God. He loves you just as much. And here's the thing that I still can't get over this. My whole life I was told. My whole life I was told how worthless I was, how I never measured up. And it's going to sound strange the way I put it. But the greatest thing is that in God's eyes, I still don't measure up, and it doesn't matter. He doesn't care. He knew how messed up I was before he called me. He knows how messed up we are. That is the greatest thing on earth. In the universe, that's amazing. He doesn't have a performance-based love with us. It doesn't matter who you are, where you've come from, what you've done. His mercies are never ending. And you may be ashamed of your past, but I'll tell you what, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. It's the power unto God unto salvation. I'm a different person. You had no clue it was that bad, did you? I'm a different person. I'm not that person. I walk around smiling all the time, and I mean it. There's love in my home. There's love all around me. And though I spent half my life not even understanding what love is, that's all I experience now. So much love that I can't hold it in and I have to give it out to people. Anybody, even if they don't want it. Because God is real. Because God is real. Anything is possible. Don't lose hope. Don't ever lose hope. Sometimes we forget. Sometimes I forget. But God is real. The only reason why I told you all of this, probably never look at me the same, is because I want you to know God is real. And no matter what's going on, no matter what's happening, no matter what is happening to you, God can overcome it. Doesn't matter if you're strong enough. I wasn't strong enough. I'm still not strong enough. But He's all the strength I need. He's more than enough. He gave me everything that I was missing, and He gave me more. I wasn't a special person. I wasn't a third-generation preacher. I wasn't any of these things. You heard what I was. And see what God did? That's how I know God is real. What on earth else could do that? I should be dead. I should be in jail. I shouldn't be here. I have a beautiful, wonderful wife, 4 beautiful, wonderful children. I go home every day and experience that love. And it doesn't matter what I went through. It has nothing to do with who I am today. I'm not that person. I'm not, people are like, well, you know, your parenting style is based on how you were raised. Listen, I'm raised by God. God's my father. I learned how to parent from Him. And I'm excited for my kids. I'm so excited for my kids. I'm so excited that they get to grow up in a Christian home with love. I am so happy for them. And I'm so blessed to be a part of their lives. Sometimes my past tries to haunt me, and sometimes I'll get depressed. I struggle with depression, I do. It's not something I talk about, but I struggle with depression. But all I have to do is just remember how far God has taken me. And I can't stay depressed long. Because I serve a miracle-working God. I've never seen anybody actually physically get healed before my eyes. It's something I've always wanted to see. But I experienced a healing. And it's more real than anything I could ever see. I wake up every day happy to be alive. Happy that God gave me another day to live. And I get to experience all the blessings that He has blessed me with. So church, I only told you this because God told me to. So you can't go around telling people how crazy I am. If I start acting weird, though, you just have a little grace. A little weird for a reason, and it's okay. It's all right. I think I'm done now. Let's pray.